The world of Oz has always been a beloved fantasy realm, ever since L. Frank Baum published the very first book back in 1900. But Gregory Maguire took it to a whole new level, adding layers of depth and complexity. While keeping the classic elements and characters we all know, he weaves in themes like religion, politics, and how these forces shape the lives of ordinary citizens. And now, with the release of Wicked Part 2, just around the corner, let's tackle some of the most intriguing questions fans have been asking. But fair warning, some of these answers come with spoilers. Do Elphaba's magical powers really come from that mysterious green elixir? Who was her true father? What role did the fairy Lurline play in Oz's history? Does Glinda actually have real magical abilities? And perhaps the biggest question of all, one that becomes crucial in the second chapter of Wicked. What exactly is the Grimmerie? Let's start with the basics. Why is Elphaba so powerful? Wicked shows us that even as a child, her magic would burst out whenever she lost control of her emotions. Now, while the green elixir definitely explains her unusual skin color, the true source of her power actually comes from her real father. And here there are two options, but only one is correct. Turtleheart. He was a mysterious traveler from the Quadling country, a southern region of Oz often tied to witchcraft, mysticism, and the arts. In Maguire's books, Quadlings are usually described as having reddish or unusual skin tones, and politically, they're looked down on, seen as a vulnerable and oppressed people. At the end of the book, there's a revelation that changes everything, and if you don't want to know the terrible spoiler, you'd better skip this part. The Wizard of Oz, Oscar Zoroaster Diggs, hails from Nebraska, and the villain this time. He's Elphaba's biological father, and from his mother Melina's adventure, Nessarose was born. Elphaba's mixed blood could explain her abilities, but there's another possibility. She might be the heir to Lurline's powers. Lurline is described as a fairy queen, or even an ancient goddess, who brought magic itself into Oz. She's the reason animals can talk and think, why objects come to life, and why the land is filled with all those fantastical quirks that would feel impossible in our world. But Lurline's existence also sparks the religious and political conflict that runs through Oz. On one side, you have the Lurlinists, devoted followers of the mystical, often dismissed as old-fashioned. On the other, the strict rationalism and institutional religion of the unnamed god, the one worshipped in the name of Oz himself. This clash between pagan magic and organized faith shapes much of the ideological backdrop of Wicked. The differences between these beliefs couldn't be clearer. In fact, the wizard's arrival in Oz can be read as a kind of colonization, where traditional beliefs are erased, replaced by centralized and imposed ones. Elphaba's fierce defense of animals only reinforces this theory. It's not just about her emotional bond with Dulcibert, the loving bear who raised her as a child. It's about standing for something bigger. And while Maguire's novels never spell out a chosen one prophecy, they do hint at the possibility of someone destined to channel the power of the most dangerous, most powerful book in all of Oz, the Grimmerie. And speaking of powers, one of the most common questions is, does Glinda actually have magic? The answer is, not naturally. She wasn't born with it. Instead, she learns to cast spells during her time at Shiz University. That means her abilities rely heavily on books, rituals, magical objects, and the formalities of witchcraft. Her powers are limited, more decorative and protective than destructive or prophetic. She can't see visions of the future, and she certainly can't manipulate the Grimmerie. Glinda's image, then, is less about raw magical power and more about political and social influence. Her magic is seen as safe, helpful even, a tool to protect and guide others, rather than something dangerous. Now, here's something that almost slips under the radar. Elphaba actually starts having visions of the future. It's not explored much in Wicked, but the novels give us more detail. At first, her visions come as blurry fragments, images she doesn't fully understand. But as her connection to the Grimmerie deepens, so does her ability to see beyond the present, glimpses of what's to come. And here's a detail the stage musical leaves out from Gregory Maguire's The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. When Elphaba was a child, she had a magical mirror. It was left in the Throp household by her real father when he first met Malena, her mother. This mirror was unlike anything else in Oz. It didn't just reflect reality. It showed visions of other places, even other times. Because it wasn't native to Oz, it carried properties beyond the ordinary, allowing those with the gift to see things no one else could. And this mirror doesn't vanish from the story. It reappears in later books, like Son of a Witch and Out of Oz, tied to the passing down of Elphaba's magical legacy to new characters. How powerful is Madame Morrible? In one scene from the film, Professor Dillamond explains how the Great Drought devastated the people of Oz and reshaped their relationship with animals. In the past, animals had taken an active role in everyday life, even contributing to the academic education of Oz's citizens, as we saw at Shiz University. But after the drought, they were stripped of their voices and reduced to mere tools of labor for humans. A common question arises. If Madame Morrible truly had the power to manipulate the weather, why didn't she intervene during these events? In Gregory Maguire's novel, this isn't stated outright. However, her close alliance with the wizard strongly suggests that she may have been the one to cause, or at least prolong, the drought. Her abilities are described not as full control of the weather, but rather as an influence over climate patterns, bending them to her will. The suffering brought on by the drought served a clear purpose. It forced the provinces of Oz into greater dependence on the Emerald City and the wizard's rule. So, what exactly is the Grimmerie? This powerful book is another element not native to Oz. It was brought into the land by the wizard himself when he arrived from Nebraska in his hot air balloon. Written in a language from our world, the Grimmerie is indecipherable to the people of Oz. While Maguire's novels never call it out directly, many believe it's an allegory for the Renaissance-era text known as the Key of Solomon, a medieval grimoire attributed to King Solomon. That book contained rituals, incantations, and magical formulas to summon and control spirits and demons, as well as instructions for crafting talismans and amulets. But here's where it gets interesting. If the Grimmerie was written in English, could the wizard actually read it? When he first lands in Oz, the only thing anyone hears him say is, a clear nod to his hometown. And sure, maybe he could understand some of the words, but having the knowledge to read isn't the same as having the magical ability to channel what's written. The Grimmerie requires more than literacy. It demands true power, and its spells are irreversible. That much is made crystal clear. But the real consequences of the Grimmerie's magic won't fully unfold until the second part of the story, Wicked for Good. That's where many of the characters you already know will have their fates revealed. Spoiler warning, if you'd rather keep the surprise for when the movie hits, you might want to skip ahead now. Even though Elphaba is the only one capable of casting spells from the Grimmerie, it's clear she never fully masters it. Her growth and her struggle to control such immense power unfolds gradually throughout Maguire's entire saga. That's why the spells she casts later on are as irreversible as they are iconic. When she reunites with her sister Nessaros, Nessa lashes out at her, asking why Elphaba never used her magic to help her walk. So, in a desperate attempt to make amends, Elphaba casts a spell on Nessa's silver shoes, transforming them into ruby-colored shoes infused with magic, allowing her to walk. And while the spell works, it sets off a devastating chain reaction. Her boyfriend, Bach, feels useless now that Nessa doesn't depend on him anymore. Heartbroken, he decides to leave Munchkinland. In a desperate bid to keep him, Nessa grabs the Grimmerie and tries to cast a love spell, but it backfires horribly. Instead of winning his love, the magic shrinks Bach's heart. Elphaba tries to save him the only way she can, by transforming him into the Tin Man, a creature who can live without a heart. Meanwhile, Fiyero, who had accepted the role of captain of the guard just to search for Elphaba, the fugitive he secretly loves, finally finds her in Munchkinland. He runs away with her, but this act of love is branded as treason. Captured by the Emerald City guards, he's tied to a pole and tortured until he gives up the Wicked Witch's location. In a desperate attempt to save him from the pain, Elphaba casts a protection spell, but it twists against her will, transforming him into the Scarecrow. And to complete the trio we all know from Dorothy's journey, the Cowardly Lion turns out to be none other than the little cub Elphaba and Fiyero freed long ago. He grows up able to speak, but never manages to find his courage. If you want to dive into the full story of the second part, based directly on the Wicked musical, I already have a breakdown on the channel. Just a heads up though, it's packed with spoilers, and some of these details might be tweaked in the movie adaptation. Both the storyline and the character development in Gregory Maguire's books are rich and layered. So for readers familiar with Wicked, it's easy to understand why Disney's prequel-style adaptation, Oz the Great and Powerful, felt like such a letdown. For starters, the movie's timeline is completely out of sync with Wicked. In San Raimi's version, by the time the wizard arrives in Oz, both Elphaba and Nessarose are already grown witches. But in Disney's film, they're rewritten as Theodora and Evanora. In Wicked, the wizard's arrival happens when the sisters are still children. Even Elphaba's transformation into the Wicked Witch of the West takes a very different path. In Disney's version, it comes from a heartbreak. After being deceived by the wizard, played by James Franco, who's portrayed as a womanizer and eventually falls for Glinda. And ironically, the good witch, Glinda, is the one who ends up with the least amount of character development in the entire film. To be fair, the movie's visuals and production design are impressive, and the side characters who accompany the wizard do bring some charm. But for many viewers, the story itself felt flat, unconvincing, and lacking the emotional depth that made Maguire's Wicked resonate so strongly.
Thank you, Sourpuss. My name is Knock.
The Grimmerie and its manipulation serve as the foundation of the entire second act. Narratively, this connects directly with Dorothy's arrival in Oz, which triggers the events of Gregory Maguire's second book, Son of a Witch. Madame Morrible, whom we've already seen wielding weather-based powers, is actually the one who conjures the tornado that drops Dorothy's house on Nessarose, leading to her death. In the aftermath, Glinda gives Dorothy the ruby slippers and sends her to the Emerald City, right as Elphaba arrives. This moment sets off the ultimate conflict between Elphaba and Glinda, who now becomes known as the Good Witch of the South.
Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true.
Dorothy's arrival in Oz will mark a turning point for the entire saga of books, and the upcoming films as well. Because even though her destiny seems to be tied to defeating the Wicked Witch of the West, Elphaba might just have one last act of magic powerful enough to escape her fatal fate. But if you want to know that story, make sure to check out the next video. And let me know in the comments what other questions you still have, or what details you'd like to add to the lore of the wonderful world of Oz. See you in the next video.